Part 1. The Lands of the North, Origins and Myths of the Vikings. Far in the northern reaches of the world, where winters are long and the nights seem endless, the land itself shaped a people of iron and fire. Mountains rose like jagged spears, fjords cut deep into the earth, and the sea stretched cold and merciless. It was here, in the lands of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, that the Vikings were born. Life was harsh, yet the people of the North did not see their world as empty or barren. To them, every mountain, every storm, every tree was alive with spirit. And above all things towered the great cosmic tree, Yggdrasil, the world tree, whose roots reached into the underworld and whose branches touched the heavens. At the center of this mythic universe sat Odin, the All-Father. He was a god of wisdom and war who had sacrificed one of his eyes for knowledge. He wandered the 9 worlds, accompanied by his ravens Hukin and Munin, thought and memory. To the Vikings, Odin was both a bringer of victory and a reminder that wisdom always comes at a price. Beside him stood Thor, red-bearded and mighty, hammer Mjolnir in hand, protector of gods and men. When thunder rolled across the fjords, the people said it was Thor riding in his chariot, defending them against the giants of chaos. Then there was Loki, the trickster. Neither fully a friend nor a foe, he wove deception and change, shaping fate in ways no one could predict. His name was whispered with fear and fascination, for where Loki walked, upheaval followed. The Vikings did not see their gods as distant, perfect beings. They were fierce, flawed, and close, sharing in the struggles of men. Around fires, storytellers recited sagas of creation and doom, of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, when even Odin and Thor would fall in battle and the world would burn, only to rise again, anew. In the glow of torchlight, children listened wide-eyed as their elders told them, "Our lives are part of this great cycle. We are born of the frost and fire, of gods and giants, of courage and fate." Thus, before the first raid, before the first sail caught the northern wind, the Vikings were already bound to destiny, shaped by their land, guided by their myths, and driven by the knowledge that the end would come, but honor would live forever. Part 2. Life in the North, Farmers, Raiders, and Seafarers. The people of the North were not born raiders. They were first and foremost farmers and fishermen, carving life from soil and sea. Their villages clung to the edges of fjords, clusters of wooden longhouses with roofs of turf and smoke rising from hearths within. In summer, fields of barley and rye rippled in the cold wind. Families worked together to tend the land, while women wove wool into warm garments and men mended nets for the next voyage. Goats and cattle grazed in the meadows, chickens scratched in the yards. Life was simple, harsh, but full of rhythm. Yet the sea was always calling. To the Vikings, the ocean was both pathway and peril. They built their famous longships, sleek and strong, carved with dragon heads at the prow. With shallow keels, these ships could ride the open sea or slip silently up rivers, carrying warriors, merchants, or settlers alike. Inside their long houses, firelight flickered against carved beams. Families ate stews of fish and meat, drank mead from horns, and listened to skalds, the poets and storytellers, who recited sagas of heroes and gods. These tales kept alive the memory of ancestors and taught the young what it meant to be Viking, to be brave, generous, and loyal, to face hardship without fear. But life in the North was never easy. Winters were cruel, harvests uncertain. A single storm could destroy crops. A single famine could end a village. The need for survival pushed the Vikings to look beyond their fjords. Some sought trade, some sought new lands, and many hungry for wealth and glory, turned to raiding. In spring, when the seas calmed, ships were drawn from their sheds, sails unfurled, and men set forth. Farmers became warriors, fishermen became sailors, and ordinary villagers transformed into explorers and conquerors. The same hands that had tilled the soil now gripped axes and spears. To their families left behind, it was never certain if the men would return. But in the heart of every Viking was the belief that fate was woven by the Norns, and courage in the face of death was the greatest honor. Thus the Viking world was built on contrasts: peace and war, earth and sea, home and journey. They were farmers, raiders, and seafarers, bound to the land, yet destined always to follow the wind. Part 3. The Viking Raids, Fury Across Europe. The year was 793, when the world first trembled at the name of the Northmen. On the holy island of Lindisfarne, off the coast of England, monks lived in quiet prayer. One summer's day, their silence was broken by the crash of oars and the howl of horns. From the sea came the longships, their dragon prows cutting through the waves, sails striped red and white. The raiders leapt ashore, tall men with axes and swords, their shields painted with fierce symbols. The monastery fell in fire and blood, its treasures carried away, its holy relics scattered. The news spread swiftly. The Vikings had come. From that day, for nearly 3 centuries, the fury of the North swept across Europe. They struck the coasts of England, Ireland, and France, their ships gliding silently up rivers to attack towns far inland. No church, no village, no market was safe. The very word Viking came to mean terror. But they were more than destroyers. In Ireland, they built strongholds like Dublin, which grew from a Viking camp into a great trading city. Along the coasts of France, they forced kings to pay tribute, silver to buy peace. In time, one Viking leader, Rollo, was granted land in northern France. This land became Normandy, the land of the Northmen. Still, the raids were brutal. Monks wrote of the endless flood of heathens, and peasants prayed for deliverance. To the Vikings, however, these raids were a way of life, a chance for wealth, for fame, for a warrior's death that would open the gates of Valhalla. The longships carried them everywhere. They plundered the rich cities of the Mediterranean, even daring to raid Seville in Muslim Spain. They sailed into the east, down the rivers of Russia, trading and raiding as far as Byzantium, where they served as mercenaries in the Varangian Guard. For Europe, they were a storm that came without warning. For the Vikings, it was destiny to seek riches, to carve names into history, to live boldly and die bravely. And so the fury of the raids became legend, a time when the sea kings of the north ruled not only their fjords, but the fears of half the world.
Part 4. The Great Voyages, Beyond the Edge of the World. The Vikings were not only raiders, they were explorers, driven by curiosity as much as by hunger for land. Their long ships, light and swift, were unlike any other vessels of their time. With them, they sailed farther than any dared imagine, into seas no map had charted. First, they turned west. The islands of the North Atlantic opened before them, the Shetlands, the Faroes, and beyond them a land of fire and ice, Iceland. There they settled, carving farms from volcanic rock, founding a free society where chieftains gathered at the Althing, one of the oldest parliaments in the world. But their eyes did not stop there. Around the year 985, Eric the Red, exiled from Iceland, sailed into the unknown and found a vast icy shore. He named it Greenland to lure settlers with hope. Against the frozen winds, they built homes, churches, and farms, clinging to life at the edge of the world. And still, the horizon called. Eric's son, Leif Erikson, sailed even further west. His ship touched the shores of a new world, a land of forests and grapes, rich and strange. The sagas called it Vinland. Today we know it as North America. Nearly 500 years before Columbus, the Vikings had reached its coasts. Though their colonies in Vinland were brief, their voyages were unmatched. To the east, other Vikings, the Varangians, followed rivers into the heart of Russia, founding trade routes that reached all the way to Constantinople. Some entered the service of the Byzantine emperors, their axes gleaming in the halls of the Eastern Empire. The Vikings were not afraid of the edges of the map. To them, the sea was a road, and every horizon a promise. They sailed not only for conquest, but for discovery, for the chance to plant farms, raise families, and carve new lives upon unknown shores. And so the legends of the great voyages lived on in sagas, where gods and men walked side by side, and where the sea kings of the north seemed destined to touch every corner of the world. Part 5. The Age of Kings, Power and Legacy. By the 10th century, the chaos of raids and voyages began to give way to something new. The Vikings, once wandering sea kings, started to build kingdoms of their own. From Norway to Denmark, from Sweden to the Isles of the North Atlantic, rulers rose who sought not only plunder, but power. In Denmark, kings like Harald Bluetooth united tribes beneath one crown and raised monuments to their deeds. Harald himself is remembered for bringing Christianity to his land, marking the shift from the old gods to the new faith. His rune stones, carved with crosses and inscriptions, still stand as silent witnesses to the moment when Odin and Thor began to give way to Christ. In Norway, warlords fought for mastery of the fjords. At last, Harald Fairhair claimed victory, uniting the realm under one banner. The sagas say he vowed never to cut his hair until he had brought all Norway under his rule. And when he did, he washed his long locks and took the name Fairhair. In Sweden, the Vikings turned east, shaping trade and conquest along the rivers that led to Novgorod and Kyiv. They became not just raiders, but founders of dynasties, weaving their bloodlines into the history of the Rus. Even abroad, Viking leaders carved realms of power. In England, a Viking known as Canute the Great ruled not only over the North Sea, but over a true empire that stretched across Denmark, Norway, and England itself. For a time, the Sea Kings became kings of land as well, their crowns heavy with more than silver, with legitimacy, authority, and legacy. Yet power came at a price. As kingdoms formed, the old ways began to fade. The wild freedom of raids and voyages gave way to order, taxation, and law. The new faith of Christianity spread across Scandinavia. At first resisted, it soon became embraced by kings who saw in it a path to greater power, linking them to the crowns of Europe. The old gods of Odin, Thor, and Frey faded into memory, their stories preserved only in sagas whispered by poets. In England, the Viking dream ended at the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066. There, King Harald Hardrada of Norway led a mighty force, but he fell with an arrow through his throat. The same year, William of Normandy, himself descended from Vikings, conquered England, closing one chapter of Norse history as he opened another. The raids that once terrified Europe became fewer as kingdoms turned from plunder to politics. Scandinavian rulers focused on building nations, forging alliances, and expanding through trade rather than war. The free-spirited raiders of the fjords became subjects of monarchs, bound by law and church. Yet the legacy of the Vikings did not die. Their blood ran through kings and nobles across Europe. Their ships and settlements changed the map from Dublin to Kyiv, from Greenland to Normandy. Their sagas carried the memory of gods and heroes, of voyages across stormy seas, of courage in the face of fate. And so the Viking Age ended not with a single battle, but with transformation. The sea kings of the north became fathers of nations. Their longships rest in museums. Their myths echo in literature. Their spirit endures in the northern lands where the aurora dances in the night sky. For though the twilight fell upon the Vikings, their story still shines. A tale of storm and sea, of gods and men, of endings and eternal memory.